The Qur'an proclaims that Allah gave to the Prophet Jesus inspiration, revelation, and the gospel. Furthermore, the Qur'an states that Jesus is the word of Allah and that he was born of the Virgin Mary. Finally, the Qur'an attributes these miracles to the Prophet Jesus: speaking to people during his childhood, making a bird out of clay and breathing life into it, healing those born blind, healing lepers, and giving life to the dead. Although the Christian scriptures do not record Jesus speaking as an infant or breathing life into clay birds, there are numerous narratives of his healing the blind and lepers and restoring the dead to life. Since the Quran does not actually tell the stories of any of the Prophet Jesus' miracles, if you want to read the narratives and learn the details of any of those miracles, you must turn to the Gospels. In this lesson, we will look at 5 miracles that are described in the early chapters of the Gospel of Mark. What did the Prophet Jesus teach? Number 7 in a series, Miracles He Performed. Up to now in this series, we've looked at stories that the Prophet Jesus told to illustrate spiritual truths and the Sermon on the Mount, an extended speech or lecture that he gave to contrast what makes up true, sincere religion versus false, hypocritical religion. In this lesson, we will look not so much at what the Prophet Jesus said, but what he did. Although many of those who listened to the teaching of the Prophet Jesus recognized that his message came with authority, others kept asking for the Prophet Jesus to prove his legitimacy. Although the Prophet Jesus never produced a miracle on demand for doubters, his life and ministry flowed with miraculous events. Here are just a few of the miracles witnessed by those who followed him. Now, after some days, when he returned to Capernaum, the news spread that he was at home. So many gathered that there was no longer any room, not even by the door, and he preached the word to them. Some people came bringing to him a paralytic carried by 4 of them. When they were not able to bring him in because of the crowd, they removed the roof above Jesus. Then, after tearing it out, they lowered the stretcher the paralytic was lying on. When Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralytic, "Son, your sins are forgiven." Now some of the experts in the law were sitting there turning these things over in their minds. "Why does this man speak this way? He is blaspheming. Who can forgive sins but God alone?" Now immediately, when Jesus realized in his spirit that they were contemplating such thoughts, he said to them, "Why are you thinking such things in your hearts? Which is easier, to say to the paralytic, 'Your sins are forgiven,' or to say, 'Stand up, take your stretcher and walk'? But so that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins, he said to the paralytic, 'I tell you, stand up, take your stretcher, and go home.' And immediately the man stood up, took his stretcher, and went out in front of them all. They were all amazed and glorified God, saying, 'We have never seen anything like this.' Then Jesus entered the synagogue again, and a man was there who had a withered hand. They watched Jesus closely to see if he would heal him on the Sabbath, so that they could accuse him. So he said to the man who had the withered hand, 'Stand up among all these people.' Then he said to them, 'Is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath, or evil, to save a life or destroy it?' But they were silent. After looking around at them in anger, grieved by the hardness of their hearts, he said to the man, 'Stretch out your hand.' He stretched it out, and his hand was restored. So the Pharisees went out immediately and began plotting with the Herodians as to how they could assassinate him. So they came to the other side of the lake, to the region of the Gerasenes. Just as Jesus was getting out of the boat, a man with an unclean spirit came from the tombs and met him. He lived among the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For his hands and feet had often been bound with chains and shackles, but he had torn the chains apart and broken the shackles in pieces. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Each night and every day among the tombs and in the mountains, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and bowed down before him. Then he cried out with a loud voice, "Leave me alone, Jesus, Son of the Most High God. I implore you by God, do not torment me." For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of that man, you unclean spirit." Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" And he said, "My name is Legion, for we are many." He begged Jesus repeatedly not to send them out of the region. There on the hillside, a great herd of pigs was feeding, and the demonic spirits begged him, "Send us into the pigs, let us enter them." Jesus gave them permission. So the unclean spirits came out and went into the pigs. Then the herd rushed down the steep slope into the lake, and about 2,000 were drowned in the lake. Now the herdsmen ran off and spread the news in the town and countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. They came to Jesus and saw the demon-possessed man sitting there, clothed and in his right mind, the one who had the legion, and they were afraid. Those who had seen what had happened to the demon-possessed man reported it, and they also told about the pigs. Then they asked Jesus to leave their region. As he was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed asked if he could go with him. But Jesus did not permit him to do so. Instead, he said to him, "Go to your home and to your people and tell them what the Lord has done for you, that he had mercy on you." So he went away and began to proclaim in the Decapolis what Jesus had done for him, and all were amazed. When Jesus had crossed again in a boat to the other side, a large crowd gathered around him, and he was by the sea. Then one of the synagogue rulers, named Jairus, came up, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He asked him urgently, "My little daughter is near death. Come and lay your hands on her so that she may be healed and live." Jesus went with him, and a large crowd followed and pressed around him. Now a woman was there who had been suffering from a hemorrhage for 12 years. She had endured a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all that she had. Yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, for she kept saying, "If only I touch his clothes, I will be healed." At once, the bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. Jesus knew at once that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" His disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing against you, and you say, 'Who touched me?'" But he looked around to see who had done it. Then the woman, with fear and trembling, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." While he was still speaking, people came from the synagogue ruler's house saying, "Your daughter has died. Why trouble the teacher any longer?" But Jesus, paying no attention to what was said, told the synagogue ruler, "Do not be afraid, just believe." He did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. They came to the house of the synagogue ruler, where he saw noisy confusion and people weeping and wailing loudly. When he entered, he said to them, "Why are you distressed and weeping? The child is not dead, but asleep." And they began making fun of him. But he put them all outside, and he took the child's father and mother and his own companions and went into the room where the child was. Then gently, taking the child by the hand, he said to her, "Talitha cum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." The girl got up at once and began to walk around. She was 12 years old. They were completely astonished at this. He strictly ordered that no one should know about this, and he told them to give her something to eat. If you have a public comment about this passage from the Injil, please use the comment box. If you have a question, email me and I will do my best to respond. Catch me at iwouldlovetotalk@gmail.com. Now, I hope you will join me for number 8 of the series to examine what the prophet Jesus taught about spiritual blindness.